Political temperature in the country certainly heating up. The stakes are high as ANC members try to put aside their differences in order to hold a credible elective conference from Friday. The race for the top positions is heating up, with some candidates having to fend off criticism due to the scandals that they embroiled in. Analysts are warning that the party needs to renew itself and focus on serving the country in order to regain voter confidence. Let's get you one take. Bring in Dr. Jakkie, who's the head of African Futures and Innovation at the Institute for Security Studies. And it's great to have you on the program, sir. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. You know, for many people, this is lost to them. There are three main objectives for any kind of elective conference that the ANC holds every 5 years. The one is around taking stock of the resolutions that have been adopted in the past, and to what extent perhaps we've come to following through on that. The other is to look at any other opportunities for new resolutions to be introduced. And then the third is around electing new leadership. It goes without saying that this third objective overshadows any other one.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the ANC, as we all know, is highly divided, and I think we're going to get an indication of exactly how divided it is tomorrow when the National Assembly debates the Section 89 report. And then we'll see what happens, particularly with those ANC members, including Lindiwe Sisulu, Dlamini Zuma, and others, that have indicated that they will either abstain or vote for the adoption of the Section 89 report. And if that happens, and they therefore do not comply with party discipline, I think President Ramaphosa would be in a very difficult position. He would almost have to suspend them, and that, of course, heading to the elective conference on the 16th would really accentuate the divisions within the ANC. So I think it's going to be an exciting week in South Africa's politics.
Yeah, as if we can take any more excitement given the past week we've had. There are a few people who will tell you that they actually know what's taking place within the ANC. I mean, it was just late last month where we were almost certain that the president was going to resign. In a matter of days, obviously we learned that this isn't necessarily going to happen. And now just as recently as this weekend, the president telling journalists that as far as he's concerned, there is no crisis around the Phala Phala saga. From your vantage point, do you reckon that there is enough support for the president to be able to survive this weekend, given just how dramatic the past few days have been?
Yes, I still think that what would happen, there will be lots of noise and thunder, but that eventually President Ramaphosa will be re-elected. And I think quite substantially so, because in a sense, the ANC's got no alternative. If an alternative candidate like Zweli Mkhize or Dlamini Zuma or Lindiwe Sisulu takes over, ANC support will plummet. Ramaphosa, we must remember, despite all his flaws and issues around him, is significantly more popular than the ANC itself. And if the ANC, if he does not stand, effectively the ANC will lose significant urban black support. So I still think Ramaphosa is going to, after lots of noise and thunder, will be re-elected. He will also be the ANC's candidate 2024 with the elections, and I think he will be South Africa's president until 2029, but he will probably have to govern at the head of a coalition government, because our expectation is that ANC support will decline from the existing 57%, which is what they have at the moment, to about 47 or even less percent. That's a 10 percentage point reduction. That would mean they would need a coalition partner, perhaps one or two smaller parties, to govern until 2029. And I think this is the last ANC government that we are going to see. I think come 2029, we are certainly going to see an opposition coalition if you look at the current trajectory with ANC support.
It's interesting you say that, because there have been other people predicting that the president, Cyril Ramaphosa that is, may not even complete a second term if in fact he does get one, because of how divided the organization was. I mean, it shouldn't be lost to us how he won the leadership contest back in 2017 by a small margin against Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And even then people were saying, given how small this margin is, the president's going to have to really go a long way to not only unite this organization, but to stay in power. Both those indicators, it appears, are not necessarily developing in his favor?
Listen, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
There's going to be all kinds of trade-offs and apparently the buying of support and all kinds of deals. So nothing is for certain, except in my view, and this is based on the analysis that we've done, that Ramaphosa not standing as ANC president and as its presidential candidate in 2024 will cost the ANC. Now, on the upside, what that would mean is if Ramaphosa is not elected and does not stand, in a sense, you would open up the opportunity for possibly even a coalition opposition in 2024. But I think that's unlikely, largely because of the differences between the EFF and the ANC. And I think, so I think that there's always a lot of noise and thunder and background issues around ANC National Elective Conference. But remember that the president is going into this with substantially more support from the provinces than any other leader. The big issue really is what is the composition of the other members of the top six.
Yeah.
And does he leave this with... does he go into 2024 with a top six that allows him to take more firm policy action?
That is precisely what I was hoping to ask you next. I mean, does the incumbent have enough people nominated in the top six to be able to have enough of his alliance members, essentially, so to speak, in that body, so that he's able to continue with his agenda, whatever that becomes for his second term?
I think that the problem with the ANC, in a sense, is that it is quite a democratic organization in the fact that the nominations come from local to provincial level. So Ramaphosa has got limited opportunity to make deals to ensure that his main supporters are in the top six. And that really has been the problem that he's had since 2017, 2018, that he was handed a divided NEC. He still has it. And he has to spend 80% of his time managing the divisions within the ANC. And the ANC is so divided that he cannot really move forward on the very obvious growth reforms that need to be made. So I am concerned that come next year, early next year, when the dust is settled after the elections, now at the end of, in the middle of December, that we will end up again with quite a weak NEC and with a divided NEC. But certainly my sense is that Ramaphosa has, in a sense, stamped his authority, despite Pala and everything, on the party, and that the fortunes of the ANC, to a large extent, depend upon what happens with him. Again, if he is not the ANC's candidate now in the elections and in 2024, the party will suffer at the polls.
Sure. It's been interesting to hear several reports of people mentioning how, ironically, Ramaphosa has come out of this Pala moment, if it's considered over, swinging because of the vote of support that has now become so obvious, at least within the governing party itself. That all being said, go ahead if you want to chime in on that.
I just wanted to make the point that for the ANC, the best solution, the best option is a decisive win for Ramaphosa and an NEC that supports his policy, and a party where the RET faction is decisively sidelined, and that he's able to appoint a cabinet that is really full of competent people, which has not been the case. I mean, the cabinet is filled with deadwood and incompetent people that are hardly able to manage their portfolios, large, unwieldy, and so for the ANC, I think a lot depends on what happens with Ramaphosa.
Sure. And I suppose you've touched on what I was hoping to unpack with you now, around whether or not we feel that the conference itself is actually going to be doing enough to address all these other issues that come with being part of the governing party. The ANC's responsibilities extend beyond deciding who their leaders are, but there are very serious shortcomings that have come from the ANC-led government within the state, and one would hope that the party would be able to take stock of this in a meaningful way come this conference this weekend so as to fix these issues. Are you optimistic that that would happen?
I'm afraid not. I think that the election issue and the divisions and the politics around that are going to dominate. And we've seen very often that the ANC takes policy decisions that are subsequently not not implemented. I've always made the point that ANC stands for absolutely no consequences, and that's really so evident in the lack of party discipline and in the fact that NEC takes policy decisions, but of course being in government is slightly different. And the ANC's orientation within the two factions are, of course, also very different. The RET faction sort of orientates towards the EFF, if I can use that example, and the Ramaphosa faction, ideologically, although they may not want to admit that, is sort of closer to the DA. Of course, the one is growth and the other one is redistribution, and what South Africa needs is growth. So what happens, particularly in Gauteng in 2024, I think is going to be quite important, because our expectation is that ANC support in Gauteng will go down quite significantly in 2024. And there in Gauteng, the ANC will then have to make a decision, if it wants to stay in power, to enter into an alliance with one of the larger opposition parties. In other words, either the EFF or the DA. And that decision may then portend what will happen in 2029. And I'm afraid to say that if the ANC decides to get into bed with the EFF, it would generally be bad news for South Africa from almost every perspective: investor confidence, domestic business confidence, and so on. So these machinations set us up for then eventually what I think will be the true transition in South Africa, which is probably 2029.
Sure. Not sure to be scared or excited, especially when you take stock of how coalitions have fared so far. Dr. Jakkie Cilliers, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Interesting insights in the lead up to the conference this weekend.